Hi, this is your host. This is a channel where we discuss everything social psychology, and in this episode, we're going to look at why some people are so damn annoying. But before we get into that, let's figure out who you are. Now, these are just some friendly reminders about liking and subscribing if you haven't already. And if you do stick around for the end of the episode, I'll share a quick tip on how to avoid the frustration of these annoying people. So here's an analogy that might help us understand the source of annoyance. Think of a computer program. Now, when you download a brand new program, one that's never been used before by anyone, it's likely that the software has bugs or errors. Maybe the pictures don't show up or the words are all jumbled together. These are errors that can make the program difficult to use. Beta software is a version of a computer program that is released before the final version. The reason for releasing such a version is to allow users to test the software and provide feedback before the final release. So even though it hasn't been tested by most people, once it's available, anyone can download it. Now, there are also people who are kind of like that beta software. They have lots of issues and problems, but they still expect others to put up with them. And although annoying, it's not surprising that this happens. Why? Well, because there are two things that people often don't get enough of and really need more of: attention and validation. People who are like beta software tend to be very needy in both of these areas. For example, imagine your friend tells you, "I feel so bad. My boss yelled at me today. It wasn't my fault, though. He's just like that." You say, "Ah, sorry to hear that. I think he's just stressed." And then your friend continues, "But I'm still so upset. Want to go shopping with me tomorrow?" Are you going to say yes or no? Yes. Why? Because even though you said that you're sorry to hear about what happened to him, you actually aren't. What you're actually thinking is, "Oh, I'm glad it didn't happen to me." If your friend was acting like a normal person, you could say something like, "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about what happened. Do you want to go shopping with me tomorrow?" In this case, he would have told you about his problem and then asked you to do him a favor. But instead, it's like he's trying to guilt you into doing something for him. All he did was complain, yet he's asking you for a favor. What's going on here? Well, this is exactly what I mean when I say that people like this are needy. He needs you to pay attention to him. He needs you to comfort him. And he needs you to do him a favor. In other words, he needs validation and affection. So instead of directly asking for what he wants, he uses complaints and sometimes even manipulative tactics to try and get it. Another thing people like this do is seek validation through arguments. Have you ever had a friend who always got into fights? They would argue with their bosses, teachers, parents, and even friends. And each time they'd come to you afterwards, crying and asking for comfort. When someone is like this, it's usually not because they love to fight. Instead, it's because they need attention, and they need it right now. So instead of finding healthy ways to cope with stress, they may pick a fight and then tell you all about it afterward. Once again, this is nothing but them being needy. They need someone to listen to them. They need someone to comfort them. And this is why they pick fights and then ask their friends to listen to their problems. People like this are also extremely sensitive. You see, most people can accept criticism quite well. They can receive negative feedback without much of an issue. However, some people are extremely sensitive. One wrong word, and they'll start crying. One small critique, and they'll feel personally attacked. That's because people who are like beta software are very emotional. If someone says something that's even slightly critical, they will perceive it as an attack. And when they feel attacked, they feel hurt. And so they may respond by lashing out, starting a fight, complaining to others, or simply crying. In any case, they need comfort. They need someone to soothe their pain and calm them down, and they expect those around them to be the ones to do so. On top of all this, people like this are also self-centered. Let's say someone invites you over to their house. You arrive and see that their living room is messy. You wouldn't think too much of it, but then you notice that their bathroom is also messy. There's toothpaste on the sink, hair on the floor, and dirty clothes everywhere. Now, you can think of two things here. Either they're a very messy person, or they have guests over, and they just cleaned up after themselves so their bathroom wouldn't be so embarrassing. The first option is clearly a possibility, but the second one is also a possibility. People who are like beta software are unable to consider others' perspectives. They're so self-centered that they cannot fathom that someone else might have a different perspective than them. For example, if you were a friend of someone like this, you might say, "Wow, your house is so messy." And they would respond, "No, you're just messy. You probably think my house is messy because your own house is messy." Can you believe this? They don't have the ability to empathize with others. They can't put themselves in someone else's shoes. And this makes them frustrating to deal with because they're so self-centered. However, in some situations, these annoying people can be beneficial. How? Well, let's go back to our original example of beta software. If you're the first person to try out the beta software, you might run into a lot of bugs. You might encounter errors that make the program unusable. If that happens, it would be better to not use that software. But if the software has been tried by millions of people and none of them have reported any major issues, then it's likely that the software works properly. In other words, when everyone seems to be able to use a certain program or interact with a certain person without any issues, then it's likely that the program is good and the person is okay to be around. In the same way, if everyone around you gets along with someone who is usually annoying, but they seem to enjoy their company, then maybe that person isn't so bad after all. Maybe you're the one who has a problem. This brings us to the last trait that annoying people have. They can be unpredictable. Imagine you're playing a video game. As you play, you learn the rules of the game. You learn how the characters move, the environment reacts, and what the monsters do. You've now developed an understanding of the world you're playing in. If the game developers suddenly change these rules, the game becomes less enjoyable. Even if the changes are meant to be improvements, the player will need some time to adjust to them. Similarly, if someone is like beta software, interacting with them can become frustrating. If they're moody or unpredictable, you may find yourself constantly on edge around them, unsure of how they might react. When people are like this, it's hard to develop a sense of security with them, which can make it difficult to form close relationships or even just enjoy their company. So, what should you do when you find yourself around people who are like this? Well, the key, according to research, is to set boundaries. Let's take that friend who is always picking fights as an example. If you set boundaries and tell them that you won't listen to them when they're yelling, or that you won't hang out with them when they're in a bad mood, they will likely improve. Of course, this doesn't mean that they'll become perfect, but by setting boundaries and showing them that you're serious, you'll teach them that their behavior is unacceptable and that they need to improve if they want to maintain your friendship. Have you ever had a friend like this? Let me know in the comments below if you found this video interesting. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos like this. As always, thanks for watching.